Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. We're going to start this morning's question. And Shamus, it's great that you're right next to me because you got the first question.
Oh, okay. Great.
We want to start with sort of where do we see the evolution of NaaS, and particularly where do we think it's going to go over the next 3 to 6 years? That might take our whole 40 minutes of our conversation, but I think we ought to look at it in two ways. And Shamus, the reason I'm asking you first is, where do we think the evolution is in the enterprise? And let's go ahead and start there.
Okay, so I spent a lot of time talking to network engineers and network architects and the enterprise side of things. There's my sole focus, really. And I think, obviously, we're seeing a major shift towards managed overlays, like SD-WAN and SASE in particular. 6, 8 years ago, the network architect was doing that himself. Like, his team was building all the tunnels and everything and running into a lot of pain, and now seeing a huge shift towards getting a managed service around that, and that is obviously a network as a service opportunity. And on the other side, there's the recognition that the local area network is a part of the picture for a lot of enterprises in a lot of situations where they want to consume that switching and Wi-Fi in the campus environment or the branch environment as a managed NaaS offering as well. So the opportunity to integrate that with wide area network connectivity is, especially with cybersecurity on top of it, is a big opportunity.
Yep, excellent. Well, and I think the next question that I think takes that is, you mentioned the carrier, so where does that lead to the carrier opportunity?
Is that question also for me?
Sure, why not?
Well, my research shows that any NaaS offering the buyer expects it to be integrated with a variety of managed security services. So I think the opportunity is to combine connectivity and security into something that's more powerful. For instance, if the carrier has a lot of security analytics in place where it's watching what's happening from the user edge all the way into the cloud, they can see indicators of compromise and like try to get in front of a ransomware attack more quickly and deliver more value and be like, hey, I just saved you a $3 million breach by combining all of this network as a service connectivity with our security offerings.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Ian, do you have some thoughts?
Sure, and you know, I'll kind of bring in the transport perspective and the optical network perspective, but just kind of going back to the very last question, where's the carrier opportunity? It's moving the data to the cloud, or, you know, as we also heard yesterday, the gigawatt data centers. And, you know, the enterprise data resides all over the place, and we heard about that quite a bit yesterday, some in private cloud, some on-prem. And, you know, there's just a massive opportunity. And just to kind of shift the focus a little bit, I mean, a lot of the conversation has been focused more on individual enterprises, but when you start to aggregate this, you know, start to think about many, many enterprises, you're starting to think about a big volume of data, and we got some hints about that yesterday, you know, in terms of the scale, getting to, you know, very, very high bandwidth levels.
Yep. Well, it's interesting. I was at another event 2 weeks ago, and to your point about the carrier side and the AI data centers, I was asked for the first time in 10 years about elephant flows. How many people know about elephant flows from the old SDN days? And I was wondering why that was, and it gets back to what they really need is a network as a service to transport all of this data, right? It might be for an hour, it might be for a day, it might be for a week, and then to be able to turn it back down. And so that's kind of where it's interesting to me just to see how so many things that were old are coming right back to being new. Brian, you're smiling. I'd love to get your perspective.
Well, it's I'm just familiar with some of the things that we've been looking at in terms of like scheduling workloads, and that's something that we haven't heard about for quite a while. And suddenly it's now conversations that we're having with some of the network providers again, that it's like, can we maybe do some sort of new class of service designations where we can do scheduling by the day instead of allocating bandwidth, you know, in 5 minutes.
Yep. Well, and we're seeing it also happen on the LAN as well. When I started my career, this was ancients ago, Pfizer bought one of the very first Ethernet switches from us to install because they needed a sequence to schedule all of these flows when the DNA sequencers were done. And it's very similar to what we see happening on the AI side as well. Gorkem, could you provide some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think also we need to look at, what is driving the demand for NaaS, right? And one of the main use cases today is cloud networking, or even more so, multi-cloud networking, right? And this space, because enterprises, they've been already transforming their applications to cloud native, so it's becoming more distributed across public clouds, edge, and different locations. And now AI is becoming part of this distributed application landscape, right? So one thing is quite interesting is, and this landscape, it's not just about site-to-site connectivity at layer 2 and 3, but it's becoming more and more application-to-application kind of networking, right? And this is beyond the overlays we have today, like SD-WAN and SASE. So I'm talking about companies like Aviatrix, Proximo, Alkira, and there are some incumbents like F5 and IBM. And I know that, there's an opportunity to integrate that new overlay with the underlay, especially for AI, again, for traffic and transfer. And I know that some operators are integrating those companies into their NaaS platforms, and some of them are building similar solutions in-house, to integrate with them. But I know that lots of operators are still thinking about their strategies, what should we do, right? I mean, the ecosystem's out there, should we compete, should we partner? And that's going to, I think, trickle down across all the layers of networking going forward.
Yep. Well, this is awesome. You also must have read my mind, because you knew what my next question might have been, which was, let's talk a little bit more about the players. And we talked about some of the multi-cloud players. Yep. This is a wide landscape. Could you maybe share your thoughts on sort of some of the categories of the players, and maybe some of the other players that we may not necessarily be thinking about, but we should?
So should I go ahead?
Please.
Yeah. So I talked about the born in the cloud the guys already, but also there's another set of players like data center and co-location providers like Equinix, CoreSite, and there are SDCIs and middle mile providers like Megaport, Intercloud, Packet Fabric. And many of these players, they built their networks with multi-cloud networking in mind, right? So from scratch, they built those networks, unlike lots of carriers, they have legacy going around. So they built in a very highly automated manner. And very similar to what's happening in that layer 7 and 3, there's kind of the same, compete or partner question. It still resides, right? I mean, Equinix is partnered with everyone, and those middle mile players are partnering, but enterprises can bypass, the carriers and go direct to those guys, right? And there's an interesting category. They're not exactly, NaaS providers or service providers per se, but public cloud providers are in this landscape, and not just for partnering, because they built extensive global backbones, right? I mean, if you look at what AWS, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and Google just launched a service, connecting multiple clouds to their Google applications, right? It is something supposed to be, carriers and operators should be doing. But also, I had a conversation with one of these public cloud providers, and they told us that some enterprises are coming to them not just, connecting to their clouds for the applications, but they're asking, how can we use your POPs and your network for our global wide area network, right? To build our enterprise networking, because they're not happy with, what their service providers are currently providing. So they're not, saying that we're not competing with you, but there's an opportunity, and they're definitely a force to reckon with.
Yep, absolutely. Ian, can you share your perspective?
Yeah, just kind of elaborating, Gorkem mentioned the middle mile. That's one of the things that we've been thinking about. And when you think about, the data that is going to be moved and the data volumes rising on the enterprise side, we really need that upgrade in the middle mile. And we've tried to coin the term the AI middle mile. And that comes back to, some of the discussions from a NaaS perspective, all the work on the payload side. So we heard a little bit about 100 gig and 400 gig waves, and that is going to become, new type of network currency. We're going to have more movement of waves. And, the networks, there'll be a lot of pieces to it. There'll be a lot of DIY. We also, another theme, and this kind of goes right down to layer 0, but I think we're going to hear more and more about this, more actual fiber construction and fiber extension. If you think about a lot of the fiber networks that were built, over the years, they ran around, the right-of-ways were railway tracks, oil pipelines. those networks were not designed to connect gigawatt data centers. So I think there's going to be an aspect of that. And in order to have the best network, it's not just going to be the network technology that lights the fiber, but it's going to be the actual fiber plant as well. So I think we're in for a real holistic network upgrade, starting from the ground up and kind of tying it back to NaaS. The 100 gig and the 400 gig, it does exist today, but we do need that payload work to continue so that it's federated, orchestrated, and automated.
So what's intriguing to me, what popped in as you were talking was how we're so much a wireless world today, but yet we've now been talking about fiber and optics and tying all things together in massive, in massive bandwidth. What's your take on NaaS in a wireless world, right? And we have a whole new wireless world with low orbit satellites and things like that. So what's the role of NaaS when it comes to that? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Ian.
Well, I just heard a little bit about wireless yesterday. A little shout out to Netcracker. Yeah, I mean the wireless will play into it. I mean, yeah, obviously fiber is going to connect where we can, but fiber won't go everywhere. So there will be a huge role for the satellite networks. I had quite an interesting conversation not too long ago, speaking to one of the fiber builders of the 2 Africa fiber networks, so one of the biggest subsea cables in the world, and they happened to be taking a personal vacation into the Canadian Arctic. And I said, "Is this a site survey as well as you're looking for polar bears?" And he said, "Forget it. We're not ever building fiber up there, because if you ever had a cut, you've only got like 2 weeks of the year where you could actually go in and so there's always going to be a need for all those more remote locations, more bandwidth out of the fiber, but you can't get everywhere with fiber."
Yep. Brian, you had something you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, Gorkem's done a really great job laying out the market landscape, and now you've added wireless to it just to make it more complicated. But when you put it all together, I mean, access is access, and you need to get to particular locations with whatever network connectivity profile you can get to those locations. But taking a different angle to all of this, if we're looking at kind of your original question, the different categories of partners, chances are, if you are in this room, you are part of the solution. The network providers and entities that you work with are trying to be part of the solution for NaaS. What we see among enterprises and their challenges is that a lot of the stuff that they're still wrestling with are the basics of things like, can you please give me a service contract that's not going to give me early termination penalties if I change my contract terms, if I disconnect, or if I need to reconfigure sites? And then the second piece to that, can you please provide me with a portal that allows me to self-configure when I need or want to do some of these things on my own? And it can't be underestimated the amount of enterprises that are still dealing with that world as opposed to the world that we're talking about here.
No, absolutely. And I think picking up sort of where you mentioned on challenges, Shamus, what are you seeing on the enterprise, right, on the user side of the equation, on some of the challenges to adoption?
Earlier this year, I did some quantitative and qualitative research on enterprise engagement and perception of network as a service, the concept. And I was doing a lot of one-on-one conversations with network engineers and architects. And in one conversation with an architect at a Fortune 500 defense contractor, I asked him, like, what he thinks NaaS is, and he said, "It means I'm getting fired." So there's a cultural resistance or cultural concern. Network engineering, network architects, a lot of people thinking that if they're going to outsource a lot of aspects of their network to a NaaS provider, they're going to be made redundant. Another piece is a lot of people are concerned about disruptions to operating models. There's a shift in what they can see when they outsource aspects of their network to a provider. Their provider takes more of their network over. sometimes those providers haven't really thought through the observability piece and what they can reveal to and supply to the buyer. Can I get telemetry from the network that that you're managing for me and put it into my management tool stack, so that when my customers, my end users come to me with a complaint about your network, I can give them answers. And is your SLA aligned with the SLA that I've set as expectations for them over the last 20 years? And so that's a big one. Like, I've talked to a network engineer at a university where he put a NaaS provider in some of his buildings to replace a traditional switching and Wi-Fi vendor, and it was extremely disruptive to him and his team in terms of what they could do for their customers, their users in those buildings versus what they could do in the other buildings when, for instance, no one could connect to the network, or someone wanted to connect the HVAC system to the local Wi-Fi, like change tickets took longer. So that was a big one. Also, as people go into secure access service edge, they're discovering that as they're outsourcing security to their SASE provider, that those proxies are a black hole for their traffic, and they don't really know how that's impacting user experience, and that's one that's becoming more and more problematic for a lot of customers.
Yep. No, that's some really great feedback. The one other one that we've seen from our SDxCentral audience has been, they're either in the camp of I'm scared to death of this thing and it's going to ruin my job, to I really want to be working on the AI networking and the data center stuff, so please take this campus and this LAN away from me, and I'm more than happy to move off of that. Gorkem, I'd love your perspective on some of the challenges that you're seeing as well.
Yeah, sure. And I can focus more on the business challenges, right? And I see there are three types of enterprises. So one is, for them, NaaS makes perfect sense. They love it and they use it. It's great, and still kind of small footprints, but it's going to grow definitely. And there's a second group. For them, NaaS is a consumption model. Doesn't really make sense right now, because they're just, for them, the networks is not really core business. They just, do RFPs every 5 to 7 years. They just outsource it to a managed service partner. They don't need those advanced capabilities like scale up and down and kind of thing, at least not yet, right? So that kind of the second group. The third is they want to use NaaS. NaaS make, perfect business sense, but because NaaS is a completely new way of sourcing networks, they have procurement challenges. Even though lots of enterprises, they transform their procurement to, consume digital services, there are still out there that they are not digital ready. So they've got legacy systems, manual processes, outdated type of, organization, because they're just used to getting networks like just, get your network procurement manager, find a solution. So the whole process is manual, slow, and costly, and that kind of defeats the purpose of NaaS, right? The agility and the cost. So there is some internal change those enterprises they need to go through, and that's proper business process re-engineering, right? And that's, we are, as analysts, maybe we are sometimes harsh to, the telecom industry, saying that, oh, you are slow and you need to, become more digital. But there are lots of enterprise and verticals out there that are still, getting there. So, because it's kind of an internal challenge, for an enterprise, but I'm also thinking that, maybe there's a role that, the NaaS providers can take, because it's not just about providing, the technical managed services and things like that, but they can help with them, through more like consultancy or some best practice frameworks. And it's more about, business and operational change kind of support rather than just, the technical side of NaaS.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and picking up from that, and Brian, maybe you could comment on is, what are you seeing as the business case that people are making to justify NaaS and starting to implement it?
Well, there's many different business cases, but one of the things that I'm doing in my other life in terms of the sorts of things that we cover is that we are looking at the consumption requirements for AI by enterprises as opposed to AI used by the telco for agents. And we're seeing a couple of different sources that are all contributing to what'll be lumpy and unpredictable traffic growth as businesses bring in AI as part of their overall digital transformation. What that means is that there's going to be a whole lot of additional bandwidth consumption, and that growth is going to be lumpy. And I mean, NaaS is the perfect complement to say, we don't really know what the future holds, but we have this dynamic service, especially going into the cloud, that we can use to adjust as we figure out what we're going to look like as our transformation project, lets us grow up into this new phase of the business.
Excellent. Shamus, what are you seeing as well on sort of the business case, particularly on the campus NaaS side?
First thing is, most of the people I talk to on the campus LAN side, they see it as an opportunity to address their gaps in like skills and resources around network engineering operations. Like they don't have the people and the time to manage things that they don't think are strategic to the business. So there's that. They also think that they can shift from CapEx to OpEx in a lot of places, and that gives them more flexibility around financial management. And then they also see the opportunity to combine more services into more of an integrated offering where they can like get more value out of their network, like security, like I mentioned already. Like they really see an opportunity to sort of combine connectivity with security and reduce security risk overall.
Yep.
So that's another one.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Well, in the business case, at the wavelength level is just, continues to be more volume and more growth and more agility.
Yep.
When we think about training and inference, training is going to be very, very bursty. So if you have a bandwidth model that aligns to that, then it's a win-win for all sides.
Excellent. All right, now we're going to switch gears a little bit to the next question is, we've talked a lot about the impact of AI and how that's driving NaaS. Now let's sort of pivot to what role do we think AI has at making NaaS actually work? Gorkem, you're nodding your head, so you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So maybe one of the hype words that wasn't really said a lot in this conference was autonomous networks, right? Because we are not in TM from DTW, but that will be like the most said word. So the point is, the NaaS depends, highly automated and programmable networks, right? And we know that the industry is going towards this, creating autonomous networks with, closed-loop automation, zero-touch automation kind of orchestration kind of systems. And what is interesting is, of course, operators have been on this journey for a long time, and they use traditional AI. Well, we are moving so fast that, we're now calling some predictive AI kind of stuff traditional AI. But what is happening is, so we are currently conducting a survey with operators to understand, what type of AI use cases they're investing in. And we are seeing a significant shift from traditional AI to Gen AI in network operations. So several operators, they're already using Gen AI in production, for example, in knowledge assistance for field operations, in assurance, and even in network deployment. They're like generating some test use cases after installing the fiber and for verification. So it's still kind of small and small scale implementations, but we are seeing lots of the trials and POCs are already happening, or they're planned to take place the next year. So AI is not just, especially Gen AI, is not just limited to customer service or productivity kind of thing, but it is increasingly becoming embedded part of the network operations to support the automated capabilities and agility of NaaS.
Yep. And Brian, where are you seeing people start to use this AI or to use this automation today?
Well, if we're talking specifically about network operators, then we can go back 30 years and talk about expert systems. What the difference is, I believe, and it's something I've been just calling dumb AI for lack of a better term, instead of having all of this, Gen AI is fantastic. It does all sorts of great things, but we need an AI that's just smart enough to do very specific things and do them well enough. And what you've got, and the difference between an expert system and what we've got for tools now, is that you're training those tools instead of coding them. And if that means instead of doing like a year-long integration project that's going to have all of these cascading code base updates and a deep bench of developers, that's going to be a very expensive project that's going to go all the way up to the CXOs that have to sign off because it's, you're spending many, many millions of dollars. With AI, if you're getting into this ability just to train stuff, and then say, okay, this is what this network condition looks like, or even better, get the app to sit inside the network for a couple of weeks, understand what it looks like, and then start having that, say, virtual training of saying, this is these different conditions, what to look like and what to do about it. That becomes a much smaller bench of requirement, a much cheaper way to introduce these applications. So AI is doing the same old stuff, but it's a vastly faster and lower cost enabler.
Yep.
Yeah, and from the perspective of the optical core, I can give kind of more of a here and now example. So classically, the optical core was pretty opaque. There wasn't a lot of operational data available. And then with the miniaturization of OTDRs, they could be deployed many, many more points in the network so people could look and see what the optical performance data is. And then you can pair that with other events. So aerial fiber is exposed to the elements, lightning in particular. Buried fiber can be exposed to vibrations from, again, railway tracks, backhoes, and whatnot. So this can be paired, people can analyze it, and then as they start to get the early signals or make predictions, and then jump to rerouting before customers take a hit. And so people have been pulling in more and more of that data, and I think the use cases in that space will just continue to expand.
Yep. Shamus, what about you on the enterprise side with how is AI being used today?
Well, the one that I hear about that there's an interest in using AI to sort of optimize enterprise interaction with vendors and service providers, whether that's opening a ticket or ordering something. I'm reminded of something that one of the members of the ELC said earlier today. I think it was a gentleman from, not today, yesterday, gentleman from UPMC saying that interactions with his providers were not user-friendly. Email alerts would go to people who weren't necessarily working for him anymore. And, I think optimization of that kind of communication would be really a big opportunity on the customer service side, customer support side, integrating NaaS providers, generative AI service provider bot with a customer Slack channel would go a long way to improving communications and notifications and things like that. So that's a big opportunity. The other piece is just automating cybersecurity incident response to some extent, more than might be available to them today. They see that as a big opportunity, just we're going to isolate this workload or we're going to isolate this site until you've had a chance to review our analysis.
Excellent. Well, we're close to getting the time where we're going to get the hook. So I'm going to give everybody a quick chance, about 30 seconds. Let's pick your one prediction for 2025 for NaaS. It's too early, but it's not too early, so we're going to go ahead and start with that. Shamus, we'll just go right to left. So,
man, you really put me on the spot here. I think there's going to be a lot of partnering between NaaS providers of different stripes and the traditional IT operations management vendors that enterprises use. I think you're going to see some partnerships emerge in 2025 and beyond between those to improve the operating model that has been disrupted by NaaS.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at with quite a bit of risk, but where are we with AI holistically? And there's hype and there's kind of disillusionment all at once. And we heard a number of different things. We heard a lot of conservatism yesterday. People looking at much more smaller, focused models that solve immediate business needs. I think everybody's a little bit cynical on Gen AI because it seems a little bit gimmicky. But I think one of the underlying themes there is that really broadens the market. And another thing is trust. People are okay with low risk items, but they don't want to send their higher mission critical items to the public cloud. But in the meantime, and this was something that we did not hear at the conference, there there's a huge number of verticals and use cases that have gone to the public cloud. And governments, a number of different governments, healthcare, finance. So it's coming.
Yep.
Real quick, 2025, I expect we're going to continue to see enterprises struggle with reconciling the static budgets that they've got inside their IT departments against the dynamic capabilities of these NaaS services. So it's just going to be an ongoing struggle for them to figure out where to deploy, how to deploy, and how to sell it to the boss.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, just quickly, I think NaaS is going to expand beyond just the transport and wide area networks, especially for operators. I think we are going to see more and more inclusion and convergence of other access domains like satellite, private networks, 5G. So I think operators are going to try to make more of these investments in a more unified manner rather than just focusing on traditional Ethernet or MPLS services. It's going to more and more converge kind of the services going forward, and APIs are going to play a critical role in that, because enterprises and developers, they want access to not just 5G, not just transport. They want network as a unified fabric, and they want to consume those capabilities in a converged, unified manner. So I think it's not going to be the end of that kind of vision, but it's going to be the start of that journey towards that networks. Yeah.
I think you've put a great exclamation point of it's the start of the journey. And just to sort of share some data that we have from SDxCentral, interest in NaaS is up 900% from the last 30 days on SDxCentral to what it was the same period a year ago. And so what we start to see is that this is the start of a super cycle, a large journey that's going to be a 10-year evolution. But we are seeing the interest from the actual enterprises, government agencies, telecoms, to say, I've got to do something different. And I think we talked about today a lot of things that are changing in the network that are going to drive people to say, hey, we need to think about NaaS and we need to think about doing our networks differently, which is going to be pretty awesome because we're going to see a lot of disruption in the market, which creates a lot of opportunity for all of us. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much today for your expertise and enjoyable. And please give a round of applause to our panelists.